So good morning, afternoon, or evening, if you are somewhere at the furthest end of the world, to everyone. My name is Ayo Sugunru. I am a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pretoria and the manager of the SOGES unit at the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. On behalf of the Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria, and on behalf of the Expression, Information, and Digital Rights Unit of the Center, I welcome all of you to this Tech for Rights Expo, which is part of the Center's Tech for Rights campaign, and the campaign that has been ongoing since last year. The Tech for Rights campaign is essentially our attempt at concentrating attention and stimulating engagement within the advocacy and human rights circles on the impact of new technologies on different aspects of human interaction, particularly businesses, democratic development, children's rights, the rights of persons with disabilities, electronic evidence, strategic litigation, and other areas of human rights that intersect with new technologies. So today, our panel is specifically looking at the rights of vulnerable and marginalized groups in the digital age. And we are specifically focusing on people with disabilities, sexual and gender minorities, and of course, children. And for the purpose of this conversation, I have with me on this panel today, academics, activists who are working in these various fields and who are here today to share their thoughts on the theme of the Expo. I have three people here on the panel who fortunately have all been able to join us. Our first panelist, or the first person I'll mention, is my colleague here at the Center for Human Rights, Dr. Elvis Fokala, who is the manager of our Children's Rights Unit, and who will be sharing his views with us today on how digital rights issues impact in the area of children's rights, or affecting the area of children's rights. I have asked Elvis for his bio, but he has told me he doesn't like a very big introduction. So I'll leave it at that for now, and you can ask him about his work and other issues later on. I'm also happy to have with us here Arudi Laura Maina. Arudi holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and psychology from Kenyatta University, as well as a master's degree in human rights and democratization in Africa from here at the University of Pretoria. Arudi has written various articles and journals on LBQ women and access to justice in Africa, and she was part of the team that undertook one of the first research on LBQ women in Kenya. She currently works at the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, NANRI, where she program over there. And I worked with her and with NANRI over the last couple of years, and I can attest to the fact that they are doing excellent work and helping very much to bring more awareness to issues surrounding the rights and challenges facing LGBTIQ persons in Africa, particularly in the issue of Resolution 275 of the African Commission on protecting people from violence on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Our third panelist is Paul Mugambi. Paul is a public policy scholar and a diversity and inclusion expert with more than 16 years of experience in development and humanitarian sphere, including inclusive programming, inclusive communication, digital accessibility, and climate change. Paul is a graduate of the Australia National University and runs a social enterprise called Disability Sausage. Paul is also an innovative content creator. He's a poet. He's also a musician with the stage name of Umpofu Number One, that is the first blind. He was recently also appointed as the Kenyan country representative of the G3 ICT Smart Cities, and is the first and only blind cricket player in East Africa. So we would have a round of questions for the next 45 minutes or so, and afterwards we will reserve about 15 minutes at the end of the discussion session for questions and answers, or interactive sessions with the panelists and the audience. So Meanwhile, however, if you have any questions or if you think that there are issues you want to call attention to in the course of the conversation, feel free to put it in the chat box and I will call attention to it from time to time as we go on. But let's go into the grit of our discussion today. So I'm going to start with Elvis, and I want to ask, essentially broad theoretical questions first on what each of our panelists understand, when we talk about the theme of digital rights. So I'll start with Elvis and ask him to give us a little, so to say, introduction, broadly speaking, on the issues of children in the digital age. Over to you, Elvis. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, colleague. Thank you, Ayo. Thank you for the introduction and the kind words. I think for me, where we are sitting, we are extremely excited that we are finally in a situation where we speak about those who really enjoy and know exactly what to do in the digital sphere. For most of us who are adults, we interact with technology more for information seeking or maybe to chat and to do Zooming and all whatnot. What we do from this unit, and I refer to myself as a child now, is that what we do for this unit is that our main objective with the internet is entertainment. Of course, the COVID-19 has introduced us now to educational platforms with the digital sphere and all whatnot. But where children are, and I'm sure that all of us who are adults will attest to the fact that even though we have the financial power, we have the decision-making power as well to choose what to buy and how to buy in terms of gadget. But when it comes to the management and the usage power of those who know exactly how to use these instruments, and that we can give credit to our children for that. And one of the experiences that I've always thrown into the box into this issue is that if as an adult, and of course you can have an experiment as we always have in physics, is that or geography or whichever other discipline that we might bring on board, is that if you want to test a child's ability to understand how to interact with a digital technology, is that you just go out and get a new apparatus or a new equipment and hand it over to the child without even the manual, and children will be able to operate with this gadget with ease without even using that manual. So the reason why I'm bringing this broad introduction is also based on the fact that we are now placed in a situation where we have our younger kids interacting with technology, and we are also aware of the dangers that play out in this environment. As caring parents, as caring guardians, we always want to protect our children in whatever they do and wherever they are. But we have a serious problem as adults, and that's the problem of parental ignorance or guardian ignorance, in the sense that we do not really understand some of the things that play out in the digital sphere. Today, as we all know, the UNCRC committee adopted last year the General Comment on Children's Interaction with Technology. That, for me, was a step up and a proper recognition within the legal sphere and a proper recognition as well within the Children's Rights Jurisprudence platform, that we have now come to a position where we recognize our children as the real users of technology. We use technology for work, and as I said before, they have other interests in how they interact with technology. And as they grow older, that interest changes. And this is where parents need to have a heightened level of surveillance, a heightened level of supervision to ensure that we guide and protect our children's interaction with the internet space. I'm cognizant that we have more questions coming, so I'll just keep it broadly in that sense, and then to dive into some of the most difficult things that we will be discussing for the next 45 minutes. Back to you, Ayo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Clearly, children do really have a level of comfort and familiarity with technology these days that sometimes can be almost outrightly alarming. But of course, that doesn't mean we should strip them of access totally. And I assume that there's a level of care. There's also rights that they also have, that, and we must find a balance between, denying and also totally restricting access. But we'll come back to that. Meanwhile, I would like to hear Laura's own perspectives also on what this age of digital rights, what it means for SOGI and especially for the rights of sexual and gender minorities in Africa.
All right, thank you very much, Ayo. So first I want to take this opportunity to thank the Center for Human Rights for organizing and inviting us to contribute to this current and evolving human rights issue, both globally and within Africa as a whole. And delving straight into your discussion, I think one of the key pointers that I want to highlight is when you look at Africa and we look, even globally, when you look at sexual and gender minorities, there's been systematic exclusion and invisibility of these persons, mainly within the mainstream media platforms and just a limited understanding of sexuality as a whole. So for the digital era, as it is right now, it has opened up, a room for SOGI persons to be able to, to represent themselves or to be able to have an avenue whereby they can as well have a voice, which was mainly taken away when you look at the mainstream media, and as well changed the perspective of so many people in that at a certain time before the era, when it comes to sexual and gender minorities, many people looked at it as a deviant, immoral, promiscuous kind of sexuality, which is something we still struggle on to date. But due to the the equal level field that the digital era has brought, then it gives the opportunity for sexual and gender minorities to speak and air about their voice. And this has, greatly increased the visibility and even advocacy that we see on SOGI issues, and has brought a lot of developments on the side of SOGI minorities. So generally, the digital era has opened up a lot of avenues for us to be able to confront so many issues that were traditionally, religiously, culturally not given the space or not given the opportunity for people to speak on. And this is greatly due to this digital era. I think that is brief enough, and thank you. Back to you, Ayo.
Thank you so yes, that is like how you frame it, at least I would think so, from the positive for people to tell their own stories directly, for people being able to represent themselves directly without this
Yeah, so we are having some technical issues there. Ayo just fell out. I think it's a network issue. So while we hold on that, I'm sure that Ayo will come back soon, and then we will take it from there. But there we go. Ayo just showed up. Here we go. Good. Should I hand over back to Ayo?
Thank you very much. It's either load shedding, sabotage, or network. I'm not sure which, but yeah, sorry. But yes, I was just recapping what Laura already told us. But I think rather than spend too much time, we'll still come back to that. Let me now go to Paul, and still again asking the same question. From a broad theoretical perspective, what does it mean for people with disabilities in the digital age? What are the issues and what are the concerns, or even, if necessary, what are the hopes? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this platform. I appreciate, and for fellow participants and also presenters. First, I'd like to say that one of the major issues which concerns me as a person as a person with a disability, I operate in two modes. First, as a consumer, as an innovator, and also as a policy maker. So on these three aspects, I look at it as an opportunity whereby it is simply digital accessibility is becoming like a big cake whereby everyone is now running to it in terms of the current development. So as much as there are challenges in terms of issues of inaccessibility of platforms or devices or hardware, the issue is how can we take advantage of such opportunities so that more persons' abilities can feel included and also be respected in terms of the human rights approaches. Because what I look at is that digital accessibility is becoming a human rights issue, and also in terms of the internet delivery, it's something we really need to really make governments to understand that it should be a right for everyone to access, because information is very crucial, and for persons' abilities, it is a great liberator out of many things because it assists persons' abilities to become more innovative, creativity becomes high, and also participating in the social, economic, and political spheres of life. Because one of the major things what technology is currently doing is removing most of the barriers which existed within different areas. Let's say in terms of employment, in terms of products, etc. So when you look at this space, it's a great opportunity which we should not let it go, and we should really not leave anyone behind in terms of ensuring that we come close to making many more people to understand about digital accessibility. Whereas I'm saying that it is also true that to a large extent, many people are not accessing internet or even digital services as the way we are speaking currently. Maybe it's just a few privileged of us who are able to log into such forums and contribute. But at the end of the day, there's that gap with structural and systematic barriers which do exist for many persons with and without disabilities, and more so persons with different disabilities, and whereby we really need to look on how we can take advantage of the situation which we are currently in, and also try as much as possible to become more innovative and creativity. And this one can be done simply by having meaningful consultation with persons' abilities and also other minority groups, the indigenous communities, persons who are less given opportunity, especially in the slum areas, rural areas. Such groups, they can easily contribute and offer opportunities. And through the challenges which we face as persons' abilities, we can be able to direct or give energies towards enabling us to have a more digital inclusive approaches. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that framing and for that poignant analysis of how the issue interesting, the fact that you brought in the issue of other communities, other minority communities especially, and how there is this connection for everyone on how they can access digital spaces. Laura, you mentioned earlier the fact that this space has allowed for adequate representation of the sexual and gender minorities in Africa. But what would you think is the case in the day-to-day experiences of people who, for example, are also still prone to homophobia, transphobia, bullying, and other forms of continuing discrimination through social media, for instance, and through other digital platforms? I'm thinking that isn't there always a concurrent growth in representation So even if we have communities that were invisible in our day-to-day life now being freely represented on social media, isn't it also true that there are other, less desirable persons and communities also having the same platforms to use it in negative ways? And how does this actually affect, and what would you say is the way forward in this regard?
Thank you for that question. So yes, it's true that the digital era has opened up, avenues for visibility, as well as you rightly said. It has also given, it has also opened up the avenue for those who are against sexual and gender minorities to also have a voice. And I'll actually give a couple of examples on how the digital space has, negatively impacted LGBTIQ persons. Just September this year, there's a film that was put out in Kenya named I Am Samuel. And the Kenya Film and Classification Board came out strongly and, banned the viewership of that film, which was being released within the digital platforms for all Kenyans to see. And this is not just the first thing. So we see that a lot of times there's a lot of censorship of SOGI content within the digital space, which is mainly spearheaded by the state, which does not want to have, conversation or a dialogue around, this inclusion or this understanding of sexual and gender minorities. So in that way, the fact that there's still association or lack of understanding or lack of there's still separation of, morality, family values, religious biases, and the discussion of SOGI matters. You find that a lot of times there's a lot of censorship. As well, as we were listening to even the previous speakers, I think one of the speakers highlighted the fact that there's a lot of government surveillance that occurs, which is one of the things you listed, like cyberbullying and harassment. So I'll give other examples. So when it comes to government surveillance, we've seen that in this days, also the government has also used the same digital era or digital space to, to quell the freedom of expression and to silence, oppositions or ideologies that are not really they do not align with them. And in this case, for instance, we see that back in 2018, for instance, in the Zambia, the Zambia police announced for a search for SOGI persons, lesbian couples that had shared, an intimate photo within the media. And there was, due to just that simple image where it has created visibility, it actually prompted the government to start looking for or trailing SOGI persons, as well as in Morocco. In Morocco, I think just in the early in 2020, we could see that ordinary people would have or create fake accounts to be able and start, putting out information that would attract SOGI persons. And in this instance, when SOGI persons fall or are entrapped within that matrix, they are able to have their right of privacy put out there, and their vulnerability is also increased. As well, we've seen let's say religious leaders still use the same digital platforms to be able to air out or disregard the different sexual identities that exist within the world. And I think one of the recent issues that happened, I think it's in South Africa, where someone wrote an article, "Call me any names, but don't call me gay." And it actually probed some institutions, for instance, the South African Human Rights Commission, to go to court and litigate on this matter, on the narrow line, or yes, between hate speech and freedom of expression. So you find a lot of times, because this matter is still contentious in so many people's mindsets and in so many societies, you find that in a lot of times people can express hate towards soggy persons, claiming, it's my freedom to express, it's my freedom of speech to express on this, whereas they don't look at the overall issue of this statement can lead to increased attacks on the soggy persons within different communities as well. So we see that pushback that occurs within these different realms of the soggy community as well. It was as I was even just researching on this issue, I came to find out that there are scientists who have come out with the facial recognition using a logarithm that can be able to detect the sexual orientation of persons. And yes, as much as they have put out that as one of a privacy concern, if this application, for instance, is taken in or taken up by governments or persons who have not yet, accepted, have not yet come to an understanding that there's so much diversity, not just in humans, but as well in sexuality, in identity and all that, they can still use these digital applications to target persons, and thus increasing homophobic attacks towards these people. So yes, it's true that the space has clearly expanded on a number of reaches that the Sogi community generally in Africa and within the globe could access. But at the same time, it has also created a lot of limitations and a lot of avenues for persons who are not yet well informed or do not want to be well informed about the issues. They also create a gateway for them to be able to perpetuate, certain notions that lead to advocacy steps that have already been made for them to regress. So yes, it's a two-way path, especially when it comes to Sogi persons. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that incisive analysis. And yes, at the end of the day, the question would be which of these two sides you will, come out more.
It could be possible. We've lost, but I see him back.
Ayo,
Back.
Ayo, is it possible that maybe you could carry on but without a video? Just checking.
Yes, they have switched off my video. I think that should help you too.
Okay.
But it's interesting that one of the things we've looked at in the recent few months in my unit here at the center is the use of technology in conversion therapy. I'll post a link to the report which we produced about a couple of months ago, and it shows how technology is now being used as a way of even trying to people's sexuality in quotes and change their sexual orientation using the art like that. Should come to be very experienced in the development of assistive technology and has been quite in this area. The issues for people with disabilities, I suppose, are different from the issues of sexual and gender minorities, but it's I think it's something we can learn from here on how technology is now being used in a way that is meant to enhance the accessibility and the opportunities available for people with disabilities in this era. So Paul, would like to hear your experiences in the development of your art, in its usage, and what you think is the most or what are the opportunities that are out there for persons with disabilities when it comes to the use of assistive technologies?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate for that question. K-Macho, it's a product which came about because of the challenges which I faced. I can tell you for sure, as a person with who is blind, I love independent and also I love my own space. So it happens that, see, in Africa, we face challenges of power outages. And we found myself that for 2 days, I didn't have electricity in my house. I could not go to a neighbor or any person to ask what is not happening, because I know it's normal for power to go out, to go off. So, and as you know, during COVID, it's a situation whereby there is a time when we were being told to obey rules, guidelines of WHO and Ministry of Health not to move out from your houses. So this one, compounded with such things, it made me to stay in the house and without power for 2-3 days. Whereas the main issue was that the meter reader had exhausted the token. I didn't know. So out of curiosity, out of that experience, I was able to interact and see how I can be able to solve a problem which many persons face who either have disability and also who are, let's say, illiterate. And when you look at persons with the different disabilities, it is not just blind persons, but I was targeting even persons with psychosocial disability and cognitive disability by this product which I've come up with. Then it happened that there was a tech Nairobi social inclusion activity, and I presented the idea whereby I was able to win because of the way that problem was offering a solution for all persons, not just targeting persons with abilities. Because my issue, by the mere fact that I missed electricity, it means that many other people are not accessing electricity because of such things. So using the product Kwamacho, it is a utility which is solving such kind of issues and also providing a platform whereby it is easy to use and you can easily budget yourself what you want to use for the month, such a thing. So I'm currently working with technical support persons from those technicians who are good at coding, etc. Because you know that one of the major challenges within our own disability world is that many of us were forced to do education. So issues of computer science, literacy, information is not a cup of tea for us. So it's also an opportunity for many persons with abilities to learn and get into such innovations. And when you look at that product, is a situation whereby I would like to transform the world and contribute to a platform whereby I can enable many more persons with the ability to inspire them to come out of the closet and also face the challenges they face and turn them to opportunities. And then there is this aspect you've talked about, the disability and the intersectionalities. There's something which I like expressing more, is that even within the disability sector or persons with disabilities, they also have this intersectionality, whether it is sexual minorities, although due to the culture, attitudes, and even within the disability sector, we don't talk so much about maybe lesbians with disabilities or even gays with disabilities, especially in Africa. But these things are there. So that's what I really wanted to say. And thank you. Maybe no more question.
Thank you very much, Paul. But before I go to Elvis, I'd just like to ask you a quick follow-up question. Do you have been any attempts by the government to integrate this technology into its services directly, rather than it being, so to say, privately run enterprise?
As you know, that working with government, it's a process. We are in the process of pursuing, because we just formed an independent company for Kwamacho, and we are having these issues of patent rights, which we are pursuing, so that it cannot be copyrighted by any other individual. And then we are looking at a situation whereby we would like to partner with the utility players industry, and also try to work with the government to see whether they can support us. It's a journey. Let's say it's a journey, because finding policies which can integrate these new ideas which are coming up, it's not a walk in the park. It's let's say a struggle. And more so, even getting the idea in terms of into place, it was a big step for me to present it, and the way it was received, I didn't expect, because most of the time we don't get these platforms, and when they are there, we are not normally engaged directly. So as the first blind innovator in Kenya or around East Africa, I look at a situation whereby it will give us an opportunity of rising up and showing the world, or even our country, it can be done when granted the opportunity. Because one of the major issues, it's the lack of involvement or meaningful engagement of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in many times, whether it is within decision making, whether it's within technology, or whether it is even discussions regarding climate change, or even when you're discussing about gender-based violence, etc., and also the perceptions which people have about persons with abilities, because many times people underestimate our capacities, and that's a major concern. When they look at you, they don't see your capabilities, they see your inabilities, which is a big, big, big issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. That certainly is a lot of food for thought, and I really do hope that there will be more, progress in that direction with like you said, the industry players and the government itself. But now let's go to Elvis. I think Elvis can tell us quite a little bit about governments and policy making. So what has been your own experience in the work you do with children so far, as it relates to digital spaces, whether in terms of advocacy development, policy development, or otherwise even just engaging day to day with everyday people who have children and who have to deal with these issues that you highlighted in your first discussion earlier.
So it was a very good way, the way Paul ended his conversation just now. It fits exactly into where I want to, or what I want to tap in the area of children's rights or children's interaction with technology in this space. And that's the issue of ability and capability and recognition of presence, to have the ability to be able to be innovative and to be able to contribute to issues around digital, the interaction with internet. Now, we are all aware that the states are the main signatories or the main operators or the main players that put these rules and regulations into play. And the states are also the main partners in any engagement that takes place with internet service providers. Now, you hardly find children in such spaces. Now, there's a reason for that, because of limitations on contractual liability or limitations on contractual powers. So minors are regarded as people with no contractual powers. So you would look, if you look at that, so from the law itself, children are already legally excluded from that engagement. But we recognize that, we accept that as well. But what is very important is that when the states get into that space, in order to have this agreement, the state needs to go into the space with a broad mind and a mind of taking care of all these vulnerabilities or all individuals that we have classified as individuals in the vulnerable space. And the child, for example, is that when the state gets into that agreement, the state needs to be persuasive, purposeful, and at the same time ensure that the objectives for which is driving that engagement prevents, more or less protects those who interact on a daily space with internet. Now, in the issue of interaction, which is what I indicated earlier, that if we break that down a little bit to the area of children, we will see one, the main aspect that come out is a level of, is what we call the moment of excitement. There is no child, no single child, and the age doesn't matter. Even if a child at the level of 5 months, or a child who at some point in their lives has some level of visibility, that when the phone comes on, that the child will not be excited. There will be some level of excitement on the child's face. And this is because those who manufacture these gadgets have done it in a way that even the lighting, the blue light that comes out from there, seems to bring to some extent some level of satisfaction on every human's face. So children, because they have the sense of feeling and the sense of reacting to the lighting that comes on the screen, so they are able to also, they can also express that excitement with some emotional or facial emotions. And from that level, they do not think of what could be harmful on that platform. They do not think of what the limitations are on that platform. What children have in their mind is their mind to explore. They want to explore and they want to use that space in order to satisfy the intentions that they have. And in most cases, as I indicated earlier, it is entertainment. They want to be entertained and they want to see what this comes out. And this is built also from the very nature and characteristics of who a child is, that inquisitive human being. The inquisitive human being who wants to touch, feel, hear, and know how things happen and know how things work out. But as soon as they grow older and they begin to know how what the limitations are, how dangerous this platform is, children become very, very intelligent. Very intelligent in the sense that they are able now to find different ways of communicating. And now that we are increasingly educating our children about their own level of privacy or how to keep their own gadgets to themselves, they also come to a point where they've now identified and they know exactly how to use passcodes to their phones that as parents we cannot use. And this is what we refer to as personalized passcodes. The first one that comes to my mind is the issue of facial recognition. There is no way that a parent's face will open a child's phone who has been coded to facial recognition. So when the child interacts in that space, the child is aware that I do not want mama or I don't want daddy to have access to this phone, so I'm going to put my face on this. Or better still, they also use their fingerprints in order to play in that space. And that we do not, and parents are helpless in that situation. Now, back to the legal nitty-gritties that play out in this. My suggestion is that since we are now aware of all this personalized access to phones and codes that not allow parental supervision or parental somewhat surveillance over children's interaction on digital space, is that where states do get into agreements with the ISPs and the digitalization of the internet usage in different countries, they should also, in a way, indicate and give access to parents so that they can also have that. But you can't blame children all through on this. You can also blame parents. Some parents have regarded phones, access to internet as some sort of a showbiz idea, some sort of, I am there, I am this modern parent or this modern family, my child has a phone. That excitement as well also exists in parenthood, which in most cases, both the parents and the child minimize the dangers that play out in that space. So it's a bit of a mouthful because the state and the business operators, when they are getting into an agreement, what comes in their minds is one, the state will think, let me satisfy or let me play my role as a state, to make access and give access to internet and give access to digital space for every citizen, so that they can have access to information, they can have access to communication and all whatnot. But in the mind of the internet provider, it is business. It is business, it is profit. And irrespective of what they put into that conversation, they are looking at how to attract human beings more. Their lighting system, their gliding system, their flat screen system, and all whatnot. They are tuned to a direction. The direction is, let's attract a human being more towards this. Children can't be innovators at this stage, but we do have some that can innovate. And if states start taking into their strides the ability of a child within to operate a phone without even accessing the digital or the manual, I think states can do more, and that is to protect our children and to have limited gadgets or gadgets that actually satisfy exactly what they need, and that is entertainment and education until further notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvis. I'm really interested in the issue of what would these laws actually look like, and to what extent would they be non-invasive of people's privacies. But I don't want you to answer that right away, because there's also something I would like us to think about, which is to what extent also is it proper, or is it we say ethical, or even should it be moral, actually legal, for private companies to collect data of children in these ways that we currently have? When children have a phone and they are signing in and they are putting in all kinds of things, from fingerprint, like you mentioned, to facial recognition, to other personal data. Is it even okay at all that this record is already problematic enough with adults, but is it even okay that these records of children should exist in the database of ISPs and other technology providers and companies?
So the idea of being okay is one thing, and the place exactly where internet usage is more at risk with children is another thing, and this is the family space. Is that it is usually and mostly in the family that children interact mostly with this internet and the gadget. It is usually in that. Now, we also have this legal protection of the family as a private entity and a private space. So there is need, and I think this is a conversation that is ongoing, like what is happening now in China, where children's access to gaming has been restricted broadly. But there is need for parents and teachers, or the state, to have a communication in order to cooperate and to limit children's access. So, but to answer a question directly now about whether children will be limited in order to activate issues such as facial recognition and fingerprints, it is almost impossible. The reason is because, in my opinion, is that when a phone is produced, there's an aspect of mass production. And we can see in terms of how many Nokia, sorry, that's an old phone now these days, how many Samsung phones or Mac phones are produced yearly. So it's mass production, it's profit making, and they do not design specific phones for individuals. For example, you could also say that maybe design a specific phone for someone like Paul, but the advantage that Paul has now is that phones already have apps and sound bites or different features that can assist him in one way or the other in his own life. But children do not have that. Children do not have that. What they have at minimum, if you wish, if you want, if you have a child as well, what you do is that you go to one of these shops, the toy shops, and buy the toy phones, or you buy even the toy apps or tablets that have limitations for educational purposes. You buy that, and then you buy an Apple app, a real one or an adult usage one, and you give the tool to a child, present to this child, the child will go for the real one. The reason is because the lighting on that phone, on that real app, is so attractive. It is silk, it is easy to handle, it is easy to interact with, and there's more opening on it. Children know it. Children know it. So maybe we start developing children's tablet as well, that it should be very similar to what adults use, and that could be good for them. Thank you, Ayo.
Thank you, Elvis. I'll come back to some of that later, but first I would like to give our audience a chance, if at all anybody has any questions that they would like to post directly to the panelists, please indicate by raising your digital hands, and I would call on you. However, if you are so far satisfied with what you've been listening to and do not have any questions at the moment, I think I'll just press on with my own line of questions. But this time around, I think I want to turn to, you could call it a philosophical perspective on all of this, and looking at the future, looking at where we are, looking at whether any of this is even, will it end well, more or less, for all of us. So I'll start with Nora again, and I would ask her, what do you think the future holds in all of this? We nearly touched on that earlier when we were talking about, will this line of, will this trend of safety, of inclusion, of community, will it become stronger versus this other trend of hate, homophobia, and repression, and the continuation of the same transphobic and homophobic things we see in the, so to say, real world, become more and more pervasive in the digital world? Are you optimistic about the future? And if you are not so optimistic, what do you think we could be doing now, whether as advocates, whether as scholars, or even as policy influencers in different ways to change things for a better future?
All right. Thank you for that. And for the other facilitators, I've gained quite much. Just before I address that question, I remembered that due to this digital, the tech world that is currently evolving, when it comes to soggy persons, for instance, we see that it gives allowance for, anonymous reporting of cases of violations and cases of stigma within different institutions, which was something that was not in the beginning there, as people would have to, take themselves physically into this institution to report on, the various violations that they faced. So bringing even, when you talk about SOGI, we have to, it's concurrent somehow with violence. You have to speak on the violence issue. So with the digital era, at least it has opened up that kind of anonymous reporting, which results in, more cases on more cases. That means we can analyze on the trends and patterns of our SOGI persons and SOGI violations within Africa. So that is also a good thing. As well, I want to echo the words of Paul, in that he rightly stated that when you talk about, marginalized populations and marginalized communities, when you talk about persons with disabilities, in a lot of times we forget that there are SOGI persons that are within persons with disabilities, and this exclusion even within that space could also be narrowed down in terms of the digital space. But what does the future look like? The future, I think it's both positive and negative. So on the positive side, we can see that there could be more, even having this conversation, it leads to more expansion of content and information with regards to SOGI, which results in, it could alter the societal perception and attitudes that people hold towards this LGBTI community inversely. However, when you look at the issue of a logarithm, the making of a logarithm, the monopolization of this application, as rightfully said by Elvis, which is mainly profit-oriented, we see that there's also a gap that comes to, lack of contextual understanding or lack of engagement or involvement of SOGI persons in, putting this algorithm or making applications that do not cause further exclusion or digital, exclusion of SOGI persons. So that is also an avenue that we could advocate for, that we could also encourage the SOGI community out there to get involved with, more of digital learning, in that they could also do applications that are forward thinking or are more inclusive. One of the best examples came actually out of a negative is one of the applications that is commonly used by the community named Grindr. There's one of the time that they released a lot of personal information on the community that they serve, which is the SOGI community. And due to the uproar and advocacy, they actually strengthened their privacy kind of notion, the privacy policies, so that not many people can now access just information on the gay community within the application. So there are also there are avenues that we could use. Of course, the law, now that we are still, there's not been a lot of developments in terms of a law that speaks on like regulating, or that speaks on digital rights of persons in Africa. Of course, there's been the declaration principle on freedom of expression in Africa, but as we don't have yet a binding document that leads to this. So with a lot of advocacy and a lot of engagement, we could also have, some of this nuances or some of this diversities included within the if it's a law, that the laws or the policies that will be formulated moving forward, so that the likes, the blur lines that comes when it comes to freedom of expression and even access to information, and the censorship could also be mitigated through this. As well, we've seen, I think it's a two-way, it's always a two-way when it comes to SOGI persons. It can be both positive and negative. It also depends on how the community itself puts their heads together and goes and advocates for these things. Because in a lot of times we find that this application, for instance, they have further marginalization, in that some sites, for instance, they just have the inclusion of two genders, whereas in a lot of countries there's the inclusion of third genders, there's the intersex, there's a transgender community, which in this restricting policies even in accessing those applications, which is more or less as a result of lack of awareness of this community, or the people who are developing these applications do not have information of the existence or how this community exists for them to include them within the applications. Then there's alienation. So I think the entry points are many. First, I think within the laws and policies that we formulate that speak on the digital spaces. Two, on a lot of digital rights awareness creation in terms of persons understanding what are their rights, what are their limitations, what can they do. I loved one of the previous speakers as well spoke of, how do you report something that maybe the algorithm does not see is as a violation, so the expansion, through awareness creation, a lot of people will understand that yes, there's a need, and when this happens, I can report. And hopefully the app developers, the Microsoft, the Facebook, as they were here in our earlier discussions, can be able to take up those occurrences or those trends and be able to formulate something that will not lead to further exclusion. As well, with the government, I think the legal the legal way is also good. As I had said earlier, when with more developments of face recognition and nowadays behavioral and app developers have come together, and now they're trying to make more applications that can even detect, your mood, your orientation, your disability, your uniqueness, or thereabout. It could also come in handy for if an application comes in and has, the likelihood of exposing some private matters of a person, if they could come out strongly and as well give people information about it before people download these applications or before the governments take up this application, just limiting the accessibility of these applications to persons who may perpetuate violence towards the Sugi community. So yes, in the future, I believe that the digital era is going to evolve into a more inclusive space. But in order for that to happen, then there are a lot of the Sugi community needs to start, understanding more on this matters, and as well they start to get engaged in the developments, in the policies, in understanding the business around it, in as well intersecting with other rights, for instance, persons with disability, children's rights as well, because we know currently, depending on the level of country and the level of awareness, there's some children that, especially when it comes to the more developed countries, there are children who come out quite young and as being transgender, as being intersex, and the likes of those. So as well, just being able to having the inclusion or the discussion of SOGI, even within other rights, when you talk about digital rights, is also good to bring that intersection so that it doesn't look alienated. So yes, there's a positive progress that we can look forward to, and I believe that more awareness and more knowledge around the nitty-gritties of the digital space could also help us expand on how best we can be able to shape the future digital space in order for it to be more inclusive and less exclusive of the sexual and gender minorities in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. I understand very well that there are so many aspects to all of these conversations we're having, and it's not something we can just unpack in like an hour or in 3 minutes sound bites. But we are now actually over time, and so I'll call on Elvis and Paul on the same issues, but this time I'd like you to, as much as possible, keep your responses to the most incisive you can without losing the content of it. So Elvis, your own thoughts too.
Can you just maybe repeat that a bit slightly? You were breaking on my end.
So yes, my question was what you think, the philosophical, like I said, perspective on what you think the future holds, and whether things would improve over time from what you are seeing now, or whether there's a chance that things would only get worse before they get better, and what we need to do to make it better, or to keep the digital age, make the digital age safer for children.
So
thank you. Can I start?
I can answer your. Yeah, is it?
Can I start?
Okay, Paul. Yes, you may start.
Paul, please, Paul. You can go on.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it short because of time. I really would like to say that the future is very bright in terms of inclusivity, and also in terms of the widening space, in terms of more innovations, and whatever many of us thought that it could not be done, it will be done in a more faster rate in terms of the digital development access, and also in terms of new ideas, and more so in terms of bringing issues of what has been left behind. Because when I look at the example of how we used to a century, sometimes back 10 years ago, in terms of rights or how people are advocating for their rights. And now we are now in a more digital space whereby people are advocating for rights, and it's more of so in the social media, digital spaces. People are developing apps concerning different aspects. And now we are seeing a lot of opportunities coming on board. But the only disadvantage is that what people are not even looking at is digital space will also create more persons with disabilities. So it's something which, as scholars, researchers, we also need to look into that, because many of us tend to ignore that fact because of the way digital space is coming. We think that it is offering solution, but it also contributes to addiction. Because I find it very interesting, because it's a question which I was asking at my Twitter handle today about where I was asking, is digital technology becoming addiction? Because now you find that people are not strictly on the internet doing this and that, and we might start losing that personal touch and socialism part of it in terms of the technology. So it's also another aspect you need to look into. I really appreciate for the opportunity. Thank you very much. You can find me on the YouTube Disability Sausage Media, and also at Twitter at Disability Sausage Media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And Elvis, I think you are well prepped now.
Yes, I'm aware of the time. I just want to say quickly, I want to tap into Paul's enthusiasm and hope, and to say, yes, it is the future. Internet is here to stay, and that our children will be more interactive on these platforms. And as I've said in many platforms, that you can't take the child away from this digital space, because children who are born today seem to be born with a chip, internet chip in their blood. So they know exactly what to do. They know exactly how to go around it. We just need to protect them better and to make sure that they're safeguarded when they interact with the internet. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. There is a question in the chat about, it's from Jerome. And Jerome says, I have followed with interest your presentation about children's rights and the use of digital tools. Connected children are so many times victims of violence and violation of their rights. How are African HRP courts, I assume that's the human rights, and commission, the African Human Rights on People, African Human and People's Rights Courts and Commission are facing or managing this challenge? So Elvis, I suppose this is for you.
Yeah, so the good news is that there is already a guideline being developed by level of the African Committee, the African Children's Committee level. So there is a level of awareness there. The only thing that we do not have as well in the continent is an established jurisprudence that will protect children's interaction with the internet. There is, of course, the AU Convention on cyberspace. I don't know the full name of that, but that has not been ratified. So maybe we can also now, in your different countries and wherever you are, we need to take that up for our countries to ratify that instrument, because the instrument seems to offer a lot more that can protect our children within the continent. So Jerome, yes, there is an instrument in the continent that has not been ratified, is not yet into law, not yet enforced. But if we get our individual countries to ratify this instrument, we need just 15 signatures. It will come into law, and we can then use this instrument to defend cases or communications that appear either in front of the court, which will be a case, and in front of the commission, which will be a communication. And of course, the African Children's Committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvis, for that. I hope Jerome feels satisfied. Unfortunately, we can no longer take any other questions at this point. We are well over time. But I would like to, just quickly take a few minutes to a few seconds to thank our panelists for their time and for sharing their knowledge. And to all of you who have been here since the beginning of this event, thank you for staying, through it all and for being part of this particular discussion. This has been the panel on persons with disabilities, on vulnerable and marginalized groups and their rights in the digital age, with a focus on persons with disabilities, sexual and gender minorities, and children. And the rest of the Tech for Rights Expo is still continuing this week. So please feel free to look at the program and to join other events that you might find interesting or relevant to your area. Thank you very much for joining us, and this will be the end of the event. Take care, everyone, and stay safe out there.